one good one left. So you got to protect
Good
it.
evening and welcome to Sugar and Silk. Careless chatter aside, this is a unique boxing podcast brought to you exclusively by Ace Podcast Nation. My name is Ben Doughty.
My name is Michael Silkolajide.
And I'm Gary Stretch. Thanks for joining. And is it Sugar, Silk and Stretch, or is it Sugar and Silk?
It's Sugar, Silk and Stretch, but some of the things still say, the branding still says Sugar and Silk on it. But Gary, as far as I'm concerned, you're in for the kill, and we are Sugar, Silk and Stretch, and it's had a different energy since you've come on board. There's not a big fight to discuss this weekend, so arguably the biggest boxing story that is still doing the rounds is most people will be aware by now that Brian McIntyre, colloquially known as Bomac, trainer of Terence Crawford and Chris Eubank Jr., was arrested Sunday gone because a loaded firearm was found in his hold luggage as he tried to board a flight back home from Manchester to the USA. And he's been banged up. He's been held on remand. Looks like he's not getting out, certainly until October the 9th, when there's a pre-trial hearing where he enters a plea.
So Ben, so he's actually behind bars.
Absolutely, Silk. He's remanded. I can't remember which prison it was. Some people were saying it was Strangeways. I think it's another prison that I've never heard of.
I think he was being moved to Strangeways, they said.
That's just so mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling. Coming from, over here. I mean, I didn't grow up. I was born in Liverpool, but I wasn't raised there. So the fact that somebody's doing time for...
He's not doing time, Michael. Let's be clear. He's on remand.
Yeah, but he's behind bars though. He can't go anywhere. He can't go anywhere, right?
No.
I mean, the crazy thing about this is, I mean, obviously it's not a smart idea to put a gun in a bag and get on a flight, but the problem with this situation is, I think the minimum sentence is 5 years. That's minimum.
Wow.
That's if he's convicted of the crime that they're looking like they've charged him with, or they're going to, it's a minimum sentence of 5 years.
So is that what they're charging him?
I mean, I researched today.
Minimum. What they're charging him was the intent to commit a crime, just degrees, just carrying a gun.
Carry a loaded gun.
Having one on you. Oh, it's loaded.
In the United Kingdom is a minimum 5 years sentence.
But Gary, I asked the barrister today. I know you'd have done some research too. I asked a friend of mine who's a barrister, and I said, "What's your take on this?" He said, without knowing the facts, he said it looks like he was charged with something called Section 19 Firearms Offence, 1968 Act. And he said he's looking probably, what did he say? It was something to do with, I can't remember the exact terms, but he was saying he thought he was looking at between 6 months and 2 years custodial, starting with a 1 year recommendation. And
I looked up is a lot today because I had not much to do, and it said minimum 5 years for this. Minimum.
He was saying that he thought that if he gets charged with importation or exportation, that would be more serious and will carry a higher offence.
They said that he came in on a private plane, which is possibly why he may not have got caught coming in.
Yes,
which is a much more serious charge.
So I know the Silk said, why can't they just let him go? He's an ignorant American, and it's not like he was involved in any skullduggery. I'm not sure it's that simple. I don't know what your take is on it, Gary.
I just think that, I mean, obviously he's an intelligent man. I don't know if he researched the gun laws in England, but I'm sure he knows that, I don't know if the gun is related to him, if he has a license. I mean, there's so little that we know, so it's hard to speculate, but you just can't get on a flight on an aircraft with a loaded gun. And I mean, he wasn't checking it into hand luggage. It was in the cargo, but still, I mean, I don't know what the ramifications are. Pressure, would a gun go off under pressure? Would it not? I mean, I don't know if it's a danger hazard as well. They say, you have to be careful with even lighters and things in certain, when you check stuff in because of the pressure that it can explode. I don't know.
We just returned from Liverpool. My mom had in her wheelchair, she had one of those battery things that help her wheelchair move around. You know what I mean? And they took those out. And
lithium is an issue, I think.
Lithium batteries, and they didn't give them back beforehand. I'm not sure if it's the pressure that could pull a trigger or cause a gun to go off. I could see if it's a carry-on and it happens to get in someone's hands. Maybe if it falls out when he's putting luggage up on top and it goes off. I'm sure there's a million things, but knowing that he's not really going there for a criminal enterprise. He's going there because he's employed, and he made a move that obviously wasn't something that somebody who's aware of the rules of different countries and of international travel, he doesn't know certain things like that. I mean, some people just forget, especially if it's a part of their everyday life, which for him, I believe it is. He carries a gun probably everywhere, and a lot of Americans do.
And there was another thing that, I mean, I just hope he can say, or I don't know, but the other thing which was not great for him was that the last time he was here, someone tried to mug him.
Yeah.
And so they tried to take his wallet or something. So, hopefully he's not come back thinking, I'm not getting mugged and bringing a gun, because that would be silly. But I think there's so little understood right now. Was it his suitcase? Was it? Did he pack his suitcase? Or could it have been one of the team? There's so many things that can go into this. But I just hope, because he just seems like such a nice man to me.
Exactly.
I don't know him, but you just can tell. I think he looks like a good guy.
Have you heard the conspiracy theories yet, Gary?
Yes. Well, I read a couple today. But
yes.
I mean, that would seem a little far-fetched. How they're going to get in his room, get into his bag, I mean, I don't know.
Well, who's spreading conspiracy theories now?
I've heard people say that it was to do with conspirators who wanted to discredit something to do. I don't want to even mention this particular outfit. They get mentioned from time to time in boxing. They're not really supposed to be operating in boxing right now. But some people were trying to say it was to do with, I think Al Heyman was somewhere involved, and it was, like a strike against Al Heyman, because I can't remember. Someone was saying gangsters have conspired to get Bomac framed, etc., etc.
What would that do for them?
Well, quite. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Quite, plainly.
I mean, if you wanted to get rid of Crawford because he's got to rule the roost for a while, and you had a fight in, you just can't beat Crawford. But I mean, the trainer. I mean, it would seem that I don't believe that that's.
It's what we call here in America doing too much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doing too much. There's no way. That's ridiculous.
I don't think having a good trainer is a real problem for most people.
Yeah. And you know what? And unfortunately for him, he does have a couple of fighters that are obviously, doing things in the business, and they're going to get sidelined by this for like at least 6 months, I guess, right?
Does he have does he have a prior bend,
Does he have any prior? I don't know if he has any prior convictions. No, Gary, I don't know about that. Don't know what his history might be in those terms. What, interestingly, Gary and Michael, I've not heard one word as yet from Terence Crawford or Chris Eubank Jr. on this. I don't know if I've missed anything. I don't think they've actually made a statement as yet.
Me too. I think probably they are like most of the people who just don't have a clue what's going on. So I think it would be irresponsible for them to even comment. I think, especially before we know what kind of trouble he's in, you could only put him in more trouble by
commenting. His lawyers are probably just like, shut up, stay off social media.
Let's see what we can.
You know what I mean? Don't say anything. Let's just get a sense of what's going on first. Once you got that balance, then we can then cultivate a story for you to put out. That would be the wisest thing, because anything could be turned against you when you're doing things like this. It could be absolutely 100% innocent, but the fact that one of the guys says all of a sudden, he brings a gun with him anywhere, it's not a big deal. I don't get it. For some people, that's you know what I mean? That's a wrap right there.
Come on, it's only a revolver. Come on.
Do you know what though?
Come on, it was not an AK-47.
I looked into the American laws today on this with flights and guns. And you have to report it to an agent. You have to check it. You have to declare it to an agent, an airline employee. You can't just have the gun. You have to say, I am traveling with a firearm, and it can't be loaded either. By the way, it has to be carried in a hard case, not loaded and ready to use. So the whole idea that this was in his luggage and it was loaded and ready to go, it's pretty stupid, isn't it, by anybody's judgment, regardless of what you think ought to happen or will happen.
It's funny. I was traveling with my ex-girlfriend who used to work for Van Cleef, and it's a high-end jewelry, right? And we went out of state, out of US. I think, I can't remember where we went. but she had sold jewelry and they paid her in cash. Now you can't come in across the border with more than 10 grand or whatever unless you say it. But we had literally a plastic bag with 200,000 in it, and when we got to, but it was all legitimate money. It's just that they paid her in cash. And when we got to the border, we said we've got 200 grand in cash in this bag, and they were like, "Cool." And they just let us through. The one thing that they did, which was angered me, is they started pulling it out to almost count it, and then everyone's looking at me, and I said to the guy, "Take it in another room, because all you're going to do is give it me back. I'm going to go to the toilet. Someone's going to follow me to kill me."
Yeah.
So why are you showing everyone I've got? But the fact that we said it was not a problem. Was she said I work for this company. We signed a form. We walked in and we took the money, and it was fine. But so, like you say, declaration is a big part of it. But you're not allowed a firearm loaded in England, licensed or unlicensed, unless you have unless you have some kind of special kind of job that requires a firearm or security or some kind of license that you can carry. But so no matter what he did or didn't, I mean, I think he would be in less trouble if he would have said, "I've got a gun in my suitcase," than not saying. But either way, I don't think it's going to sit well with UK authorities.
Well, it's almost like common sense wasn't used at first, but common sense could be used at the end, and they can kind of like work together to, like, they juxtapose, but they kind of work together now. It's like Bomac should have done this at first, but it doesn't mean he should be doing 5 years because of this now. I guess they've got to prove he wasn't coming over with any malicious intent, as was talked about, but. Here's a guy, he's on top of the world now. He's, what I mean? He's trainer of a world champion, one of the greatest fighters fighting today. He has a lot of money to earn. There's just no reason for him to come over to London with the intention of, just why he brought the gun in the first place is, I guess, it's confusing. It's perplexing. But, hey, I think it could be explained away, and I guess they have to give him just to make sure and let everybody know that this is the law in England, and they're going to give him maybe the minimum, you would hope, if they give him anything at all.
Yeah, maybe it could be used as a kind of promotional thing to spread awareness and say, this guy's lucky. It's not because he's in a privileged position, because he has some connections and he trains the best fighter on the planet, arguably. But let's be constructive. Let's not be punitive. And listen, guys, if you're coming from the States or anywhere else, do not, or leaving our country, you cannot have a loaded firearm in your hold luggage.
Yeah, there you go. And you can't have a firearm at all, period, right? Loaded or not.
Well, no, you can't. No, not on an international flight. I don't believe. Certainly in America, within kind of what they call them, domestic flights, that you can have a gun. Yeah, if you travel, if you fit the rules and the requirements, and you declare it to an agent, you can. Yeah.
But coming into England, you cannot come into England with a loaded or unloaded, is what I'm saying.
No, and I didn't realize till Gary told us that he came in on a private plane, because everybody early doors at the start of last week was saying, how did he get it here in the first place? And obviously some people were saying, you're assuming he brought it. Maybe he brought it in Manchester. There's enough bloody guns there. But Gary has cleared that up by saying he came on a private plane, which I didn't realize.
That's what I've read. He came on a private plane. So, but that didn't help him. That said that the charge would increase dramatically because then it's
importation.
It's even a more serious offence that if he's brought it on a private, because he's not being checked or whatever, then that gets into another bag of worms. So I just hope it's some. I don't know. I hope it. It seems like I understand the laws are set up to protect the public, but he doesn't seem like a dangerous person to me who had any intent of and he's there. Where is he from? Nebraska. I mean, it is a everyday.
It's a Cornhusker state.
It's a very gun friendly. For them, it's normal. So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but that almost leads to the perfect segue into the mind of a fighter, right?
Yeah, because no one knows what was going on in his head, and you wanted to talk in particular this week about
gone to the Eubanks fight. I'd have been better off.
Yeah, Gary wants to talk about that for the rest of the year, so because he can say he told us all what would happen. But I know, Michael, you did. In all seriousness, something you wanted to discuss in particular was an episode, in a way, dedicated to the peculiar psychology of boxing, of fighters and trainers as well, in terms of the way they motivate you and how the whole psychology thing works. I know that Gary's got a lot of thoughts on the whole area as well, obviously, as any fighter would have. How do you want to kick us off with this one, Michael?
Well, I mean, basically, Ben and Gary, I mean, as you both know, fighters have, I mean, you're dealing with, every fighter has their own personality and their psyche, and their styles, as I had stated before, reflect their psyche. And the relationship between a trainer and a fighter is probably one of the strongest bonds in any sporting activity where the fighter is where the athlete is so reliant on the advice from his corner, somebody he trusts, somebody he's built like, it's been on average, it's probably at least a decade, if not more, 10 to 15 years from the amateurs up into the pros, and then to move up from the pros into a top contender position. And you have this one guy telling you all the things you need to know and giving you the confidence and the awareness and making sure you have all the skills and you done all the drills and prepared yourself right for this fight. And that's so that's kind of like where I want to go with it and talk about a little bit. And I think it's something that we can continue. Every single fight, there's a psychological side. And, we're not privy to what's going on inside the camps, but we certainly can, I guess, post-fight, give people like a kind of sense of what these fighters were going through when this was happening. What do you think of the psychological side of it?
I think a lot of, most fighters who have had relative success, I think, start at a pretty early age. I think we've all established that, you need to start the game young. I think of course, the Anthony Joshuas and people have been late starters and still had success, but I think the general norm is, these kids start young. And a lot of the kids, it's like an extended family. Most of the trainers take on this father position. Maybe these kids don't have a father, or they get some form of authoritative discipline and some structure. And I think a lot of the kids who go to these gyms, or some get pushed to go to the gym because there could be troubled kids, or some find their way there, but they find some form of stability and somewhat of a, often the trainers take that father position, certainly the wisdom of someone they may not have in their life, and then they help to bring structure and discipline and a sense of right, wrong.
Yeah, because in society there does seem to be a lack of a father figure. Like the father isn't as as disciplined or as there as we used to think he was coming up. Like
we can't even be now with today's society. You can't even. Like when I was a kid, if I did something wrong, we'd get the belt. The father would get the old belt and whackers, and like today you'd be in jail. So,
Gary, these days they get the IBF Intercontinental belt for misbehaving.
Yeah, an intercontinental belt sounds really hard.
And there used to be that, some of the societies we have, there's the, when you leave school, you have to do 2 years in the army. I think it's great for societies to have some structure, some discipline. There's a whole lot of good kids out there.
Especially for the male child, especially.
There's a whole lot of good kids I've seen in these neighborhoods. If you have to get to know them, they're good kids, but they don't know any other way. They're born into a survival mode. They think the norm is doing what they need to do to survive, and they don't have structure. They don't have discipline. They just get put and they survive. So I think that the gyms give a solid base.
Well, they can though, Gary. But it's almost like, look, I think fighters, when they have coaches, their coaches should have had the experience, and so once they've had the experience, it's almost like when you go to a boxing gym, you should be going to a dojo. Like you have to have a belief system as a trainer. And when you have a belief system, then there's a whole array of things that line up behind that that'll help them get to that point of perfection. I think the reason why so many fighters fall short of hitting their goals is because the trainers don't have that lined up properly. There's the psychological part and the physical part. The two have to mesh. They have to come together. It has to be like the trainer has a theory, and the athlete is the physicalization of that theory. That's kind of how it's got to work.
So any great trainer has to have a profound psychological effect on any fighter he trains.
Oh, absolutely. If they don't have the respect of the they'll always have the respect of the fighter, because the fighter's looking at this person who's investing effort and time in them. So after you've spent, like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months training somebody, all of a sudden this person he sees you as Allah. You know what I mean? It's like he sees you as everything. You're his guru, and anything you say, Cus D'Amato could come back down from the sky and with wings and float down beside this fighter and tell him what to do, as he told Mike Tyson what to do, but this guy is still going to listen to this trainer who doesn't have.
Who was that guy for you? Was it your father, or was it someone else like Hector Roca?
What? It's a very complex. That's a whole different thing. It's really complex, and it's something all fighters go through. But you bring that point up, and I remember that when I first came over to the States in '86, a series of things happened, and I just wasn't feeling. When I moved from Canada to New York, and we laid roots down here, and I was going to Gleason's gym, and I was just uninspired. And my father thought I wasn't listening to me, so he spoke to some people who said, Mike Tyson goes to this guy named John Halperin, and he's a hypnotist. And so take your son to John Halperin, and he'll help you out like he helped Mike Tyson. I mean, Mike Tyson's undefeated. He's like at that time, it must have been like number 5 in the world or something like that. He was moving up fast, and he wasn't yet world champ. And so I went in there and I met the dude, and he's a really nice guy, and we're sitting there, and he's starting to talk to me. He goes, "I'm going to hypnotize you now, and so just relax." And and he talked to me, and I closed my eyes, and then I woke up actually maybe 45 minutes later, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I fell asleep." He goes, "It don't matter, it worked anyway," kind of thing. And I was like, "Okay, it worked while I was sleeping." Okay, so anyway, I guess it's about what you want to believe, but I don't think that you innately know what's wrong. You innately know, but you just don't have the words to express it or the experience to express what was wrong, and so just the conveniences and the family, the whole, you have a support system back in Vancouver, and I came to New York and I had nothing. And so it was really laying down new roots, and you have to, a whole bunch of different people have to trust you, have different experiences with people in the gym, and then you're dependent upon one individual, which is your dad. He's your social, he's your personal, he's your professional, he's all these things. And so you have this dynamic going back and forth with each other, and it's not always the most comfortable thing. So I think what he wanted to do is that he felt he was losing control of me, and so in order, if I get hypnotized, then he's in control of me, and he's gonna, But my biggest problem was as a fighter, and I think this is what many fighters suffer from as well, unfortunately, and that's I actually listened to what he told me. And the thing is, as a fighter, what you should do is you should take your fighter and you load him up with all these weapons. And once you've loaded him up with all these weapons and it's time to fight, he instinctually has to be able to know when and how to execute those things. And that's what the greatest fighters do. James Toney does. That's what Muhammad Ali did. That's what Sugar Ray Leonard did. They have a sense of a moment. They have the sense of their opponents. They're not wound computer controlled. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of thing. Whereas you can just take your fighter back to the corner, as they did with Mike, and they're saying, "Listen, go in there and throw 5, 6, 7, and come to the 1-2." And those are the worst things you can do, because if that doesn't work, then you guys are sitting there and he's stranded in the boat.
And that was Mike Tyson's big problem: the fact that he wasn't adaptable when it hit the fan and when the chips were down. That was a bit. Exactly. He was supremely drilled and he was awesome, but he didn't have that adaptability and that human factor.
Yes. Yeah. So that's one of the points that the fight's won and lost in the gym, and it's what you do in the gym. You train them, you give them, like we said, you give them the resources, give them the weapons, but you also psychologically, like, you have to know what a fighter is feeling and thinking. And by that time, 10, 15 years with an individual, you should know what they're capable of and what they're not, and mentally where they reside, and kind of like build the fight around that.
So, Gary, I know you had a number of trainers, but which one was the one you feel had the most profound Svengoolie effect on you?
My first, because I came from a broken back family. My mother and father divorced, and my father raised 3 boys. And at that time, I started getting in trouble. I was a quiet kid, people always say flashy. I was actually a very shy, quiet kid, but I started getting in trouble. Started getting in trouble at school. I got into a situation with a big kid who was picking on my brother. And my brother's just a nice person, not to say my brother couldn't have dealt with it, but I dealt with it instead of him. And I ended up smashing this kid's head into a chocolate machine, and he got cut, and they kicked me out of school. And I was not allowed to go back until my father went in to see the headmaster. But my father said, "I'm not going in. I'm too busy." He was a plumber. He was working man. He had 3 kids. He was working round the clock, taking us to school, feeding us. He didn't have time to go on. He said, "I don't know." So I went to work with my dad for a couple of weeks, like in the plumber's van with all the boys. It was great. And then eventually the headmaster came to the house and said, "Look, we've got to talk about your son. He's a good boy, but he's got this anger." And the big thing, what they decided was, let's take him to this gym. And he had a friend called Mr. Freeman. He said he's a boxing trainer, and he'll straighten your boy out. So I was on the stairs listening to this conversation. I thought, I'm not boxing. If they would have asked me on a different circumstance, I'd have probably loved to go. But because I was forced to go, it was not happening. So my dad literally dragged me there 4 or 5 days a week, dropped me off and picked me up. And I stood, hands folded, didn't do a thing. And my dad, the first night, said, hit the bag, whatever. I'm like, fuck you. And he slapped me. And the trainer said, no, leave him with me. So he left me with this trainer. And 9 months went by. I never hit a bag. I never did a thing. Just defiant, not doing it. And every day my dad would come in and he'd say, "How was my boy?" And the trainer said, "Oh, he's great today." And I looked at him thinking, he never snitched on me. He was amazing. And I fell in love with him because he had my back, And one day I was doing my usual, and I looked in the office. It was a quiet night, and the trainer was in the office, and he smiled at me, and I smiled, and he said, "Give me a nod." And he said, "Do you want to do a little bit today?" I said, "Just so." And he said, "Oh, yeah, sit down." And he wrapped my hands, and I will never forget it. It was like a piece of art with the tape and everything. And we went on a journey, and we bashed half of the world up. But what's interesting is, for the first part of my career, I didn't have the self-regard for myself. Like, I wouldn't lose because I couldn't let Mr. Freeman down, because he invested so much in me. I would break his heart if I lost. So most of the early wins was I was afraid to let him down. And eventually, as I got, my confidence grew, and then I started to do it for myself. But that was some years before I started to do things for myself. So as Michael says, the psychological side of it, and you can do extraordinary things when you have a reason. And I was never letting Mr. Freeman down, so I'd go out of my way to get up in the morning and run. I would do it, but it was for Mr. Freeman. It was never for me. Eventually, it became for me. But it was that someone gave me a mission, gave me a purpose, believed in me, and I repaid them with my energy, time, discipline, dedication, and eventually that grew into something of some kind of self-worth, that then I started to do it for myself. But
there's all sorts of what's beautiful about that is there's all sorts of fuel our experiences, and we call it, it's what spurs us on to things, as you're saying, that there's all sorts of fuel that take us in different areas, and you using your coach, and not wanting to let him down as a major one.
Yeah, it was so important to me because, and he used to look at me, and he was an ex-fighter. He was a middleweight, amazing face, and he had the face of a fighter that had maybe lost a few more than he won. But it's funny. I think he was a very good middleweight, I believe, but he was never reached the pinnacle. And to try and I felt in my heart like he put everything into me, and he was trying to make me the fighter he couldn't be, maybe. And I felt a lot of pressure that I had to when something that amount of time and belief, then I had to make sure I was worth it. And so it was a lot of pressure in its own way, but it's whatever you need to motivate, and it certainly motivated me to get better and better. And like I say, for most of the early part of my career, it was never really for me; it was for him. And then, it changes, and you start to plant seeds, and as you start to grow, you start to develop, and then the journey took its course. Where, at some point, I did it for myself, but for many years, it was for someone who believed in me.
Well, what about you, Ben? From your experience,
what in terms of
you say, what was your psychological approach like when you go? Do you know what your nature is? I guess basically,
definitely. You've seen me box, right? You've seen footage, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to be honest, I feel half embarrassed having the Sugar nickname next to yours because you were a world-class fighter and I was just an amateur. But the whole white sugar thing, that was my thing. I wanted to be Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, and so there was that. But the thing is, as far as Sugar Ray Leonard goes,
well, which one of those two were white?
One thing I missed was the spikes. I didn't get it. Sugar Ray Leonard was a mean motherfucker, and he was a savage finisher. Yeah. I had a pretty style, fluid style, wasn't bad, but I didn't really want to hurt anybody. I'm like Gary. I could see Gary had the spite and the savagery. You had it. Your raison d'etre is, you don't want to ever fight to go the distance if it doesn't have to. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that mindset. When you talk about
why do you think that, Ben? What was the missing link? Like for me, I'm sure Michael would say the same. For me, it's self-preservation. It's you put me in a corner. I'm going home tonight, hopefully. So
I'd rather win a fight looking good, Gary. I'd rather look good and people say you're so sweet. People used to say all the time, you watched Ali a lot, did you? You watched Sugar Ray Leonard a lot. I'd rather hear that and go the distance than stop someone in 30 seconds with two-fisted attack. And that was my mentality. I wanted people to say that was sexy boxing more than I wanted to bust someone upside the head and win inside the distance. I think that was the wrong attitude, by the way, but that was the way I was wired when I was fighting.
Okay, so I'm going to name, and you all pick one fighter after I do. The greatest, most competitive, I guess those kinds of minds, those perfect fighter minds, mentalities. And I'm going to start with that I really, really admire. And there's the obvious ones, but I'm going to go with something that may not be as obvious to people that kind of embody my kind of style of how to do things. Evander Holyfield.
I knew you were going to say that. I don't know why. I knew you were going to say it. We're talking about him this week.
Yeah.
Gary said Sugar Ray Leonard, right?
Yes. Holyfield would take some beating when, like Michael says, when it comes to a mental strength. But Ray had incredible mental strength too, I think. I think Holyfield, Leonard are two of the top on my list.
First thing came to my head was Hagler.
That's
the first place I went to.
Wow. And Hagler appeared to always have a physical advantage over people. Like he never fought at the point where he was at a disadvantage, right? He always had a physical advantage, and everyone came up to middleweight to fight him. He didn't go up to fight
the big glitzy fights, with the
exactly.
Leonard Hearns.
I think that's something that you have to look at, because if you look at Holyfield, he pushed himself he conquered, you know, his division, and then he pushed and pushed and pushed. Leonard did the same. What, 5-7 weights, Leonard?
He was champion at 5 weights one way or another. Yeah, some people query the nature of how he did it.
And I'm not doing this to denigrate Marvin Hagler at all, because he was absolutely one of the greatest middleweights of all time, no doubt about it. He fought in his division. He knew his lane. He stood in his lane. He said, "You want to fight me? Come up and fight me. You want to fight me? Come down and fight me." Absolutely cool.
And he beat the who's who of middleweights before he got them big paydays against the smaller guys coming up. He did clean out the middleweight division even before he became champion.
Absolutely, you know? He did his time. Wilford Sippian, Hamsho,
Briscoe.
Yeah, I mean, and Sugar Ray Seals, really talented fighter. He cleaned the floor with all those guys and cleaned out the whole division. So and really respectable, excellent fighters. So I'll let you carry on, Gary. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make sure I clarify.
No. I mean, for me, I think Ray Leonard is my favorite. I think he had an incredible mental strength. I liked his whole psychology of how he fought. I like that he brought entertainment, but he was not. It was not. He was
more like Savage Ray Leonard.
Savage. Yeah. He was an animal. I mean,
you know what Mike Tyson said about him? He said, "You thought he was a fancy Dan, but he wasn't. He was a pit bull with a pretty face."
Everyone talks about Roberto Duran, who I love, but Leonard, first fight, stood toe to toe with him, with arguably the most animalistic fighter of his era. And if you could pick a winner, because you could,
and especially as an infighter, Duran was one of the greatest infighters of all time.
Leonard matched him on every step of the way, and it was like Burley, you know.
Yeah,
it was. This people say Duran won. People say Leonard. It was so close.
Gary, to be fair, I've never heard anyone say Leonard won that fight. I've never heard it disputed Duran won. It was close, and one of the judges had it 10 rounds even. That Angelo Paletti, but I've never heard anyone question that Duran got his hand held in the, you know.
I actually.
You mean 15 rounds? 15.
Yeah, I questioned it. I actually felt that I thought it was. I don't think Leonard lost it. That's for sure.
You know what's strange about that fight, Gary?
Sorry,
Leonard won the last 3 rounds on every card. It's very rare to win the last 3 rounds of a championship fight on every card and lose the fight.
Yeah, and I thought that he did enough to. I don't think anyone lost the fight. I think you could. It was such a fight. I don't think you could give it either way. I think it's just completely. There was too much. Both guys give so much.
Sticking with the psychological part, though, that's what I'm saying. Like Ray has taken his experiences that he had experienced from boxing and also outside of boxing, and that was his fuel in those fights. Like there was something he would dig into that wasn't just like your typical fighter. He went beyond that. Like, so there was either some demons or some angels that were powering him, you know, through either love or hate or experiences, whatever he had that helped him take it to another level, because that's not conventional stuff. Like you see that
with the Hearns fight,
sports, right?
Yeah, look, the Hearns fight. Some of the fights he had, his head was this big, you know. He took so much. He was a tough man, and like he had as much lead in him as anyone I've ever seen. And like Michael says, he had this place he went where he's a hard man
to get there as a fighter. That's where you want to be. And you know, like certain fighters, obviously Duran was there too, Tommy Hearns. It's like to get into that spot, that's that sweet spot. That's that you're not feeling anything, you're not hearing anything, you're not all that. Everything is just like everything's slowed down and you're just seeing things in an advantageous way. You know what I mean?
And Ray always, what's amazing, you know, he found a way to win.
Yeah.
You know, he found it, and he dug deep many, many times. And he had incredible ability, but he also had an incredible mind. He had incredible resistance. He was truly an all-round and a beautiful fighter to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I still rather watch him than anybody else. You know what, Gary? Sometimes I look at his bad performances and I love them. And I see like a bit of footage of him sparring with Sean O'Sullivan that you get on the internet, and there's only like 10 seconds of it, and I think I just love that. Just that little move. He didn't even do anything, didn't even throw a punch.
Yeah.
But there's something deeply beautiful about it to me, you know.
Beautiful fighter. And again, if you looked at him, he didn't have like, you know, you look at Hearns and you look at Hagler, maybe even, so they had these physical attributes. Leonard was a petite little guy.
Built guy, yeah.
I met him a few times. I met him in LA, and you know, we shook hands. He came over, we said hello, and he was like this. I thought, how can this man beat Hagler and Hearns? He's tiny.
He's not a big guy, is he, Gary? He's quite a small guy.
5'9", maybe, is he? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I towered over him. Just so, I thought this, you know, little wrists and little hands. I thought, what an amazing fighter this man must be to deal with the people he dealt with. And
have you met Duran? Because Duran is so. Michael talked about the intensity of Duran and the kind of other levelness of his kind of intensity. But you meet Duran today, and he's just so gregarious and so happy-go-lucky, and he just doesn't have any of that. He doesn't give you any clue of that intensity when you meet Duran.
You know what I think that is, Ben? What I think that is, and Ali had that too. He had this. We didn't see it because obviously maybe the cameras weren't on Duran at the times they would, like with Ali, as they were in social situations, and you wouldn't see. And he didn't have command of the English language, so you couldn't be all that gregarious and talkative and you know, really, you know, with that sharp mind. But I think he does have that. Ali would do something like this for himself psychologically, go into a fight. He'd talk himself into a corner. He talked so much that he would have to beat this guy. Otherwise, he'd have to go bury his head in the sand in Riyadh somewhere and never be seen again. He just put that kind of pressure on himself. And Duran, I think, he was very much that way, but he had to do it in an aggressive way. He had to do it, and he had to physicalize it because he wasn't that obviously eloquent like that. It's just not.
You know what's interesting is, you know, you meet people, and some people are just born fighters, right? That's like a lot of them. I know guys who know.
But I think everyone's a born fighter. Come on.
Well, no, I mean, I know guys who didn't get nervous. It's like normal for them. They love fighting, right? I never loved fighting. I mean, I love boxing. I love the science.
But let me ask you again. I'm going to take you to task. Guys who don't get nervous are guys who don't react on time. You need nerves going into a fight. If you don't have any nerves going on, you should be retired. The worst fights I ever had is exactly then when I was not.
There's a certain breed of guy who's born to do it, and there's guys who learn to do it. Like for me, Ray, like Duran, there was a little animalistic in his youth, whereas Ray was like a gentleman, like a quiet, you know, a very eloquent, gentle person. And it was a different kind of animal, and that's what I found fascinating with the Ray Leonards. Like Holyfield is a little bit different to Ray Leonard. Holyfield's like old school.
Yeah.
Like I knew, it's so funny when he fought. I didn't know, but I felt he would beat Tyson when he fought him. Everyone said no, and I thought to myself, you know, he's the ultimate pro. So Mike's going to do his thing. Holyfield's going to do his thing, and he's going to have to go into deep water with Holyfield he can. And because and both times he couldn't, but he's just a consummate professional, Holyfield, and so he has this incredible strength of mind, great form. You know, he's just a solid, incredible professional, and but again, like it's almost like he was born to do it. You know, when I look at Ray and I look at some of the other fighters that have come along the way, that you would think it was the last thing they would be is professional. Yeah. I knew some great fighters in England, some of the amateurs, like the Gilbuddy brothers, who George was much more of, he fought Tommy Hearns to a split decision as an amateur.
Yeah.
Ray was such a little gentleman, like a fragile, and he was he won 6 ABA, I can't remember how many he won.
Yeah.
Ray was afraid of the shadow. Like a little boy, but then he fought and he was like a different person. So some people are just
naturally, it's kind of like Michael Jackson, right? Like he's shy on stage, and when he got on stage, it's like bam, there's everything lights up.
Yeah, it's amazing how some people are born to do it. Some people just.
Did you ever?
It's interesting. I was going to say, like, everything, every living organism on this planet hunts. Everything eats, right? If nothing ate, if it, so there's that. That's why I'm saying there's a competitive survival side in every single living organism, from bacteria to an elephant. You know what I mean? Everything eats, and everything competes, and because of that, that's what I'm saying. Everybody has fighter in them, but how does the coach get it out of him? And a lot of coaches aren't able to do that. Do I think that I got the best out of me? I think I never really got to know myself. You know what I mean? When you don't know your own self-worth, and when you don't know your own true abilities, and sometimes that's developed, you have that's why you have these substantial amateur careers, and everyone that has a successful substantial amateur career, like an Olympic medal, or even just like an international medals and experiences, they're so much better than any fighter that has never fought amateur or fought a minor amateur career. Every single one of them goes to the top. But the fighters that don't have that amateur experience, because you have to internalize the fact that punches are coming at you. You have to see them in numbers, and you have to emotionally have to be able to make sense of it. That's the thing. You have to emotionally make sense of what's coming at you, and then physically deal with it, and be okay with it. That's the only way you can.
Not every world-beaten amateur goes to the top as a pro.
No, I mean, there's exceptions to everything. Roberto Duran, and you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, but never mind on that side. What about your Howard Davis Juniors? And
it's two different games, isn't it? One's a sprint and one's a marathon. You know what I mean? It's like some amateurs are, they're born.
But why wasn't Howard able to switch it over in professional? Why do you guys think? Why, Gary? Do you think
he was certainly a very, very good fighter, and you could see that. And I think today he would have grabbed the world title probably, but he had hard. Everybody thought he was going to beat Jim Watt, but that was a hell of a performance by Jim. He ran Edwin Rosario real close. It was kind of
that Jim Watt fight made no sense to me at all. I was watching that. I was like,
I wish my pro career was over 3 rounds. I'd have had a great year.
Well, you'd have beat Eubank for a start, Gary.
Yeah.
Unless he started earlier somehow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, for 3 rounds, I beat most of them. But it's a different game, as you know. The amateurs, it's fast and furious, and the professionals. I think the professionals, that's why they get the big money. Is you have to maintain the discipline for a long period of time.
Did it intimidate you, Gary? Did it intimidate you, the distance? Did it, like 6 rounds, 8 rounds, 10, 12 rounds? Did it resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't intimidate me, but it 12 rounds is a long ride. You know what I mean? It's it doesn't matter who you're with. You can be with the very average man, but he's going to catch you in 12 rounds when you get a little lethargic or a little, it is a quite an intimidating ideal to think I'm going to go and fight 12 rounds. It's a long time, and it's a long time to stay focused and stay on your game and not have someone have any kind of success. For 6 rounds, I would always be very confident in any fight that I could beat most people over 6 rounds. But when it gets to 12 rounds, and some of these fighters, they get stronger every round, and they start to work you out, and then your little tricks don't work anymore. After 3, 4, 5 rounds, they started to see what you do, and you've got to keep reinventing yourself so that they can't read you. And so it is a different game. Hence, that's why they get the big money. But yeah, I think it's knowing how to go the long fight and how to maintain and keep fresh, meaning keep them thinking, and not to get red. It's not an easy thing.
So I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to ask Ben. Oh, I forgot.
You need to know the question.
I'm going to ask you. It was so perfect. All right, so go ahead, Ben. It'll come back to me, and I'll interrupt you. How about that?
Yeah, interrupt us when you got the question for us. Do you know, Gary, that Michael did 15 rounds? Not many fighters.
No, incredible.
Around today did 15, of his generation.
I think Johnny
Owens. What though, guys? The 15-round distance, it's when you're in the fight, it doesn't even feel like it doesn't. You can go numerous rounds without even like I got myself into the kind of condition whereas I could go rounds and you could even not even have a bell. It's just go and that's just what you're adapted to.
It's funny because I found in a 12-round fight, there's certain stages, like when you're in round 6 or 7. Seems like it's a long way to go now. And then you get to round 10, let's say, there's only 2 rounds left. It becomes easy. You think, 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of psychological, hurdles that you have to go through. You could have like a rough 7th and you've still got 8, 9, 10, So depending on how the fight's going, I think there's certain, you have to be mentally strong and understand that.
So you weren't empowered by the bird with the card that went around.
Ringo.
It's the only time I never looked at the bird with the card, and I never. No.
The thing is, Gary knew he was meeting most of them later anyway, so he didn't pay a lot of mind during the fight.
Here we go again.
He's a bird man.
Here we go again. It's not a bad tag to be labelled with, Gary. There's worse slurs upon your kind of public image. I feel so.
Lately. Yeah. No, it's nothing wrong with the bird with the card. Yeah.
Well, Mickey Duff hated them. You know that, guys. Mickey Duff said, "This is a serious business and men have lost their lives. What the hell has some bird wiggling our blooming arse got to do with it?" He hated them with a passion.
Everything. This is what we sacrificed 2 months of training for.
It's the whole point. It's the whole. Mickey Duff was missing the whole point, basic tenet of the prize fighter. Well, obviously now there are.
Mickey fought, right? Because he had a face like a fighter.
He had about 50 odd pro fights. Yes, Gary.
He looked like a mile of bad road. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? In his last fight, because he decided he was going to retire, he said to the promoter, "I'll go crooked if you want on this one. I'll take a dive if you want." And the promoter said, "I want you to try and win it. I'm going to bet on the other fella anyway."
He was. He had a face. Yeah, he had a face for radio.
Did you have dealings with him at all?
I was with him when I was with Barrett. Duff Barrett. So
okay, of course you were. So
when I turned pro, I went to the office. Barrett was with Duff, and they had the essential offices next to each other. So they were together as much as
in
they
Soho.
Were.
Yeah, National. It was called National Promotions or something like that. It was in like Wardour Street way, wasn't it?
Yeah, my biggest regret was leaving Mike Barrett. I thought he was a gentleman. I liked Barrett. I could have stayed with him. I think not for any other reason, just because I thought he was a nice person. I only knew him as being a nice person to me. But you're young and you get led different directions, and I wish I would have stayed there. But no, he was an interesting character, Duff. I spent some time with him a little bit, and he was a very dry, cold, ruthless kind of promoter manager. Yeah, I heard him have conversations. I was in the office once, and I think Kayla was fighting someone. I can't remember, or he had some kind of argument with Kayla.
Yeah.
Or I can't remember if it was Kayla. So don't. But I heard him say and I think it was Ron Gray was the matchmaker.
Yeah.
And I think the phone went down with some fighter. I can't remember who it was. May not have been Mark Keller, but it was someone. And then he called Ron Gray, and they were talking, and he went, "Bring in a top yank, get him done." Like his own fighter.
Buster Drayton, right? Buster Drayton.
I can't remember, but he said, "Bring in someone, let's do it." Like he wanted to get his own fighter taught a lesson. And I thought, I freaked out because I thought that could be me,
Well, it's funny because I feel we should acknowledge Andre Herrera, who's making plenty of comments on. He's been watching the whole show, and he said some complimentary things. But he mentioned that old line of Mickey Duff's, "If you want loyalty, get a dog," which is that is quoted all the time nowadays in boxing. But that's a perfect case in point, Gary. That he didn't expect loyalty, and neither did he offer it.
No, he was ruthless, and it was like watch your words, because whether or not he could get you done or not,
this seems to be like, I mean, that's not even the undercurrent. That's the whole ocean of boxing. It's you're only as good to even to a lot of trainers and managers. You're only as as good as your last fight, and they'll turn on you in a second. If things aren't going your way, it's fingers start pointing and mouths start jumping off, and all of a sudden things aren't what they used to be, and everything's not okay in paradise. But like,
I remember Cameron Lithgow.
Yeah.
So I remember him on a bill. It's so funny because Cameron, when I turned professional, we were being trained by Gary Davidson at the Thomas of Beckett when I first turned pro, and Cameron Lithgow was there. It's funny. And so I was a pretty dedicated young kid. I was like little, from the north, didn't know nothing. And so there was me and Cameron and a couple of others, and we were all living in an apartment opposite the Thomas of Beckett. And Cameron was renowned for being a handful. He used to go out and drink and eat, and he'd be 3 days in a sauna to make weight every fight. Yeah. And so they locked us literally in this building opposite the Beckett, and Cameron tied the sheets together, and we climbed out the window from the second floor. And he took me. I'm this, I'm just following him because he knew the ropes. And we was in one side of the Thomas of Beckett drinking Guinness, and the trainer was in the other side, Gary Davidson, playing pool. He had no idea that his 3 fighters were drunk as a skunk.
Yeah.
And then we got back to the house and we couldn't climb up because it was impossible. So and it was freezing cold London. We had to go and say, okay, let us in the house and get busted, because otherwise we'd have died of hypothermia. But Cameron was one of these guys, and he would have to boil down. He would never get down to weight ever. And he would 3 days in a sauna before he'd lose 20, 30 pounds. And he would win it every time. And it got to the point that they said, this guy, if you just could get him in shape, he's a world beater. So the first time ever, they literally locked him down, nutritionalists, diets, and he trained like an animal, and he fought this fight. I can't remember who he fought. I was on the same card, but he was very angular. He looked like a movie. He got down weight properly. And he got cut to ribbons.
Yeah,
for the first time, because his face was very, and he was lying in the changing room after the fight, and he would have won the fight had he done it his own way, because you could see he was pressing the fight but he got stopped on cuts, and he's lying in the changing room being stitched up. And I'll never forget, Mickey Duff or someone walked in and just threw his contract on his chest. I was crying because I loved him. And he went, "Here, you're free agent." And he was lying there being stitched, and he got the contract on his chest. And I just thought to myself, this is a tough business. I mean, that's how ruthless it was. Yeah. He just threw it and walked out the room, and he just looked up. And
so some people kind of like, some fighters have to hate their opponents going into the fight, right? But that's like a helpful fuel. That's only like good for the first round or two. Then you better have some skills about you.
Yeah.
I used to love the game. I liked, like, for me, I loved the game of I enjoyed as much making people miss as I did hitting them. If you can make them miss, then make them pay. The mental, the mental games and the it's a battle of will, and and then how you impose yourself and how you impose your will. And it's a very complex, as you both know, it's not just about physical. I think boxing, the mental side of it is so underlooked, hence why we get great trainers and they find a way to put us in the right space.
Well, and one of the craziest things, that one of the hardest things you can do in boxing is come back from a beating someone's beat you, and you come back and you beat them. Like that's just
like last week when Gary nailed it, for instance.
What did he nail?
I got beat by
Eubank.
I got beat by a kid as an amateur, guy called Paul Bager from Liverpool. Tough kid. He was an England international. I fought him in some fight. We had an absolute tear up, and I think he beat me on a majority decision. But I was banged up in the fight. It was a rough night. And then I went in the championships the next I think in the championships when I fought Collins in the final and ABCs, and the first fight I got picked was Baker. I thought, but my dad said, Gary, he's just he's an animal. You can't. A boxer can always go down to his level and fight, but he can't come up to your level. So you've just got to be smart. Yeah. So I listened and I boxed really smart. It was one of the easiest fights I've ever had in my life, and I turned it around and I was like, it was a big lesson for me that I learned that science is, like we say, great boxers. A fighter can't raise to that, but a good boxer can go down to the level and have a fight.
I think that's a great axiom for future, for future fighters to be told. They say you could always go down to the fighter's level, but he can't come up to your level.
Yeah, that's definitely fighter conversation. Like that's fighter lingo that a fighter will get right away. They'll understand that. Somebody and this happens all the time because a fighter gets challenged on that man level and on the ego level and all these other things, and they're like, yo, and I'm gonna this and I'm gonna that, and you get into all this, and all of a sudden you forget about the skills that you have.
Like Leonard Duran won.
Exactly. Right. And then you play it, you fight the fight on a primitive level, and you're not bringing all your skills to the table.
Sometimes it's fun though when you outman them, you outball.
When you do.
I think Joe Calzaghe said that when he fought Kessler. He said in the end he got in a bit of a tear up because he said, that's just who I am, man. And I think that's a part of a fighter too. So another thing I'd like to discuss, we're running close to the hour. We like to get these shows run about an hour in length, but I don't know if you two guys agree with this, but I think sometimes when a guy, for instance, comes out kamikaze tactics against a known dangerous puncher, it's actually a sign that he's bottled it, but it's a camouflage way of bottling it and your nerve having gone because it looks like you're being brave. I would cite Trevor Berbick against Mike Tyson, the way he tried to fight him suicidally, in my opinion. I think that's because his nerve had gone. I don't know whether you guys agree with that.
I mean, I don't know that Trevor Berbick has any other way of fighting, though. I don't know if he has many options.
I don't think he had to stand with him like that and throw. I think it looked like his bottle had gone to me, and then you think, well, just I had hit him with a good shot.
Trevor Berbick had proved to be somebody, psychologically very on the precipice of a lot of crazy things, right?
He wasn't the most stable guy, and certainly, the way his life.
So actually expecting him to fight anywhere near a stabilized fight is. Or sticking to a game plan or anything like that is absolutely out the window. I mean,
but he didn't normally box like that. He went 15 rounds with Larry Holmes, for instance, by boxing sensibly.
There's that could be true, but then if you look at Deontay Wilder, the key to him, the most dangerous puncher in the world, was put him on his back foot, take it to him, and then he couldn't deal with it.
Took the levers away. Take them long levers away, Gary. Fury suffocated his style.
Yes, but one would say you take it to Wilder, you're suicidal. But no, it's like he found the key to put him on his back foot. Maybe
that's a great point. That's a great caveat. It doesn't necessarily dispute what I was saying, but yes, it's a great caveat because normally that was obviously not a sign Tyson Fury bottled it. It was the kryptonite for Deontay Wilder. Great point.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's not allowing these guys to do what they do. And
yes,
you know what's really wild about Wilder is, I mean, he was beat. He was knocked out by Fury, and psychologically though, he's the exact same fighter he was before. So there's a certain amount of denial you have to, like, he hasn't been,
he was in massive denial.
You break a wild horse, he hasn't been tamed. He's not been broken by any of his experience.
But Amir Khan suffered those devastating KO losses, and it never seemed to affect his temperament ever.
Really? I mean, I remember his first time he got knocked out against that kid,
Prescott, Brady's Prescott.
Yes, and that was pretty devastating. You don't think from there? You don't think
he never changed his style, went gun shy. He rebounded from that. I think he was able to compartmentalize those. It's just that stuff happens
as an experience. Yeah. Yeah, I see that. I mean, Aaron Pryor was very much like that as well.
Well, Pryor never lost a fight except to Bobby Joe Young, right? As a pro, it was 37-1, I believe.
Yeah. But I mean, even when he got dropped, he got up, and it's like he dropped the other guy.
The fight against Antonio Cervantes, when he actually pushes himself up, he falls onto one arm almost and pushes himself right back up.
He hit the ground. He hit the ground face first. Was it Dwan Johnson? Dewan Johnson from Kronk, and Akeo Kamada from Japan. He got hit. He got dropped by Kamada. He got dropped on his back. He rolled through, stood right back up, and came back and hit the kid before the referee had a chance to get in between them.
Pryor was wired. He was amazing. Do you guys remember the stare down for the Dwayne Johnson fight?
Oh yeah,
the pre-fight stare. Did you see that, Gary?
I'm not sure.
I'll link it to you on YouTube in case you see it. It's one of the all-time great stare downs. Almost more so. I always say Leonard Benitez when I think of the great stare down of all time.
And
but
Dewan
this
Johnson
is right up there.
Dewan Johnson was a hell of a puncher. Like he could crack. That kid was everything coming up in Kronk. That was the time Hilmer Kenty, Tommy Hearns, all those guys were just murdering it.
Did either of you guys ever go to the Kronk to train?
I never did. I mean, I don't wish I would have either.
I worked with Bill Miller in Detroit.
Pops.
He trained Tony for. He was an amazing trainer. And Jackie Callum managed me at the end of my career.
Yeah.
The best person I ever met in the game as far as the person. She's the most amazing person. Mm-hmm. And to this day, we're friends. She's amazing. I wish I would have got her in the beginning because she's like mother love. She's just the kindest.
Jackie Callum.
Yeah, I will bring her on the show because she's such a smart. I'll bring her on the show if you want to, because she'd be great. She's got a great mind, and she's had some life, and what a career she had. Mm-hmm. Meg Ryan played in the movie Against the Ropes. Jackie she didn't like the movie because it didn't really portray what she believed it was her story, but she had a hell of a story and difficult path being the first woman in boxing, at the time.
In the business side, Although remember they had that woman Eileen Eaton way back in the day in Los Angeles promoting and such like that. And actually, there was a woman called Bella Burge who was promoting Out of the Ring in Blackfriars, which got bombed in the war. There's a circular boxing venue back in the day in Southwark, and Bella Burge was the promoter. Actually, she was a female promoter in the 1930s and 1940s. But that's anorak stuff, I fear.
I think it's great to have women in boxing these days, in both as fighters and promoters and managers, and I think they bring a good other view on the sport, And I don't think there'd be anything wrong with a little bit more love for fighters. They need it, and women have this what's the word? This. Nurturing, and I think a lot of fighters lack down the life, and I think Jackie was incredibly nurturing as a manager, promoter, and but she had also great strength. But she gave you this real sense of belonging, like you was in a team. Because it's very long.
Responds a little bit differently, right? Because like some people just need. Like there are some guys that are real savages out there, and they just just can't show them any soft side of a, you know what I mean? Everything's got to be hard edged and definite with them. And
I was with one fighter. I won't mention his name because he might not want this shared because he's in the media. He was a good middleweight from out of Britain. He won everything. It's not DeGale, and he's on TV these days. And his brother was boxing in the ABAs when I was a coach at Repton. And one of the other boxers from another club in the changing room was doing pads with a woman. I think she was might have been from Sheffield, this woman. And this particular fighter, who was an amateur still himself at the time, but he went on, he was a pro just about, but he went on to become a major name. He said, I could not do pads with a woman. I just couldn't do it. He actually said, I'm like Borat. That's where I'm at on this racial equality thing, gender equality.
Borat?
I could not hit pads if a woman was holding them. So that was interesting.
I don't know how to come back to that one.
No,
maybe that's really the end then. I was kind of looking for.
That's a nice segue.
Okay. Well, listen, guys. You realize what we've created for ourselves. We're back on Friday. Sorry, whoops, it is Friday. Get it together. We're back on Sunday.
A quick one. I shouldn't say this on air, but why not? Because we're on air. Michael's former number one middleweight contender, you've put FOR space MER.
Oh, that wasn't me.
Have you seen that, Michael?
That's Simon, I know.
Yeah, that is something I
elected before the next show. The man is.
Yeah,
basic grammar, the least we expect.
He doesn't do potatoes and carrots. He's not a farmer. He's a foreman.
Well,
yeah,
they
exactly.
didn't put that hyphen that's there in my name. They didn't put a hyphen between light and middleweight for years.
Right.
Yeah, that's wrong too, right? Grammatically.
And the thing is, Gary's already said that he doesn't. Yeah, what's it say? Former British light middleweight champion says, yeah.
Yeah, but it should be a hyphen between light and middleweight.
Yeah, because he wasn't a middleweight who happened to be a bit light. He wasn't like 157. He was a light hyphen middleweight, 154 pounds. We do need all this, and like you say,
welterweight.
We're better to discuss these production issues than during the end of the broadcast. As I always say,
the public understanding what we go through, trying to get our technical savvy people to help us.
Yeah. On that note, we're with these podcast. Can't even say it. You guys are having a negative effect on me. I'm losing my professionalism, my slickness, my delivery.
Anchor's going missing.
Yeah.
We are
with Ace Podcast Nation for the time being, subject to various talks about Michael's hyphen and lots of other stuff. Listen, guys, if you've enjoyed this at all for any reason whatsoever, join us again on Sunday, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. EST. Don't know what time it is in Bulgaria. Don't really care. Thank you so much for joining us as always, Gary and Michael. Later.